Amazing revelation. The orphanage connection that transformed a billionaire's life forever. Jack Harmon paced the sleek, polished floors of the tech firm with a storm brewing in his mind. The revelation about the orphanage initiative ignited a fire of determination. It was one thing to build a future for himself, but compromising the dreams of the innocent was another. The memory of Mr. Thompson's encouraging words echoed in his mind. "You can do anything, Jack. Don't let others define who you are." Yet the weight of his past bore down on him, wrapping around his consciousness like a vice. He could almost hear the whispers in the hallways of his old life, threats of inadequacy, the sneers of fallen hopes. Ethan's laughter punctuated the air in a cruel reminder of the elitist world he now navigated. Jack shuddered as he recalled their last encounter, a calculated blow aimed to derail his project. His insecurities flared up like never before. Did he truly belong in this realm? Any flicker of confidence was extinguished by doubt. Jack clenched his fists, feeling the heat of anger rise. Should he confront Ethan? The very thought sent a wave of nausea through him. What if it cost him everything? His internship, the chance at success, perhaps even the only family he had left, Mr. Thompson. A cacophony of emotions surged within him, a war between ambition and ethics. He took a deep breath, but his heartbeat quickened, each pulse heavy with dread. Scrutiny from his peers sliced through the air, students from affluent backgrounds who turned their noses up at his orphanage roots. They could be sharks circling menacingly. His eyes darted around the room, feeling exposed, vulnerable under their gazes. "You don't belong here," one voice whispered, echoing the sentiments of his childhood. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue." With every passing moment, the stakes felt higher. The initiative was not just a project, it was a lifeline to children still trapped in cycles of poverty, yearning for what he had fought so hard to achieve. A sudden image of his siblings, but ones he'd long since given up on finding, slashed through him like a knife. What if they were out there, needing help, seeking connection? Was it selfish to pursue his own dreams while knowing their struggling fates? The question paralyzed him. But could he stand idly by? The thought churned his stomach. He clenched and unclenched his jaw, wrestling with the gnawing uncertainty. Confronting Ethan might mean losing everything he'd strived for, while sacrificing the very future of children like him. What was he willing to lose? As moments stretched into eternity, he felt a chasm open beneath him, a dark pit of despair where his dreams would die if he did nothing. The tension in his muscles tensed further, veins throbbing with pent-up energy. He was at a precipice of choice. Jack stood poised to make a decision, heart racing, with uncertainty whispering seductive lies into his ear. Would he take the leap into justice, risking all he'd built for a past he sought to transcend? Or would he remain ensnared in a world that felt foreign and lonely? The clock ticked menacingly, time racing against him as he prepared to face the man who threatened to shatter the fragile life he'd clawed to build. In that moment, Jack was neither a child of an orphanage nor merely a businessman. He was a man haunted by choices that would define him forever. The air crackled with possibilities as darkness loomed ever closer. Jack took a hesitant step forward, his resolve wavering as anxiety gripped him. The sterile walls of the tech firm closed in, and the fluorescent lights overhead flickered, casting a stark, unnatural glow. He could feel the weight of judgment from those around him, the whispers growing louder. Each face reflected a different fear. What if he fell flat? What if he became a cautionary tale? He gripped the edge of the conference table as if it could steady his spiraling thoughts. His past loomed ever larger, a specter reminding him of each failure and humiliation. The sharpened memory of Ethan's derisive laughter seemed to echo in the air. Did he truly have the strength to defy not only Ethan, but the self-doubt that had plagued him for years? Jack swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus. "Just breathe," he whispered under his breath, steeling himself for confrontation. The initiative was bigger than him. It was about those innocent children with lives he had once lived. Ethan had chained him in fear long enough. It was time to break free. The boardroom loomed ahead, its polished glass doors virtually gleaming with the promise of conflict. Jack took another deep breath, feeling the pulse of his heart against his ribs. Was he ready to face the challenges that lay ahead? Uncertainty crept back in, cold fingers wrapping around his chest, squeezing tighter with each thought. Behind the door stood the ruthless elite, ready to dismiss him, prepared to tear down his every ambition. And yet, as the memories of his siblings flooded him, faces filled with yearning for connection and belonging, he felt something shift within. A cascade of unstoppable determination surged into his veins. He owed it to them, to the ghosts of his past, to confront not only Ethan, but every architect of doubt who had sought to undermine him. Summoning all the courage he could muster, Jack shoved the door open. The conference room fell silent, heads turning, curiosity mixed with disdain painting the expressions of his peers. Jack's eyes sought Ethan, who lounged at the far end, an air of confidence surrounding him like a cloak. "Jack," Ethan spoke, feigning surprise, a smile creeping onto his face. "I didn't expect you here. Planning to pitch your little plan again?" His tone dripped with cynicism, igniting the dormant anger inside Jack. "Yes," Jack said, his voice steady, surprised by the confidence coursing through him. "But not just my plan. It's much bigger than that. It's about the children we should be helping, not hindering." Ethan laughed, cutting through the tension like a serrated knife. "Children, you really think you can make a difference? Look around, Jack. You don't belong in this room, let alone in the discussion about real business." With each mocking word, Jack felt the fire grow brighter, hotter. "Maybe I don't fit your definition of success, Ethan, but I know the value of community. I've lived the consequences of neglect." With those words, the atmosphere shifted. A murmur rippled through the seated audience as they began to unravel the personal stakes behind his mission. A few faces softened, eyebrows raised with curiosity, while others wore expressions of disdain. But Jack wasn't there to please everyone. He was there to advocate for the children whose futures hung in the balance. "Even if I make mistakes," he declared, "I'll fight to ensure their voices matter." Having delivered the weight of his intention, he now stood not in fear, but in fierce defiance. Ethan's expression shifted, darker, eyes narrowing. This battle would not come easily. "Let's see how long that determination lasts," he sneered, a challenge sparking in the air. Jack felt every heartbeat thundering in his chest. He was no longer a pawn waiting to be pushed. It had begun, a duel not just with Ethan, but with the shadows of his past. Reflection dawned on him. This was the very moment he had been preparing for, whether he realized it or not. But just when he felt the tide beginning to shift, a sudden snap of the door drew everyone's attention. Jack turned to see a new figure entering the room, someone unexpected, someone who could change everything for him. The tension whispered promises of risks and revelations, leaving Jack on the edge, racing toward choices he couldn't yet fathom. The figure stepped inside, silhouette framed by the harsh fluorescence, a striking contrast to the glaringly sterile room. Jack's breath caught as recognition flashed across his face. It was Miss Leela Chen, the influential investor, previously unknown to him, regarded for her keen insight into social enterprises. She commands attention not just by her presence, but through her palpable understanding of the world outside corporate glass towers. "Can I help you?" Ethan's voice dripped with condescension, but Leela's gaze honed directly on Jack, as if he were the only person in the room. "No, thank you, Ethan," she said, her tone courteous yet firm. She turned to Jack, curiosity flickering in her eyes. I heard whispers about your proposal. I must admit, I'm intrigued." A hush fell upon the group. It was as if they had all forgotten Ethan's derision. Jack felt the pressure in his chest expand and lighten simultaneously, a moment of recognition blooming. Someone believed in him. That flicker of hope kindled a greater fire within him. "Thank you for being here, Miss Chen. The initiative is about providing opportunities to children, offering them support and mentorship that I wish I had as a kid. We cannot afford to ignore them any longer," Jack replied, skillfully crafting his words. Lila nodded, reflective. "You know, Jack, I built my success on the foundation of what I learned in that space. It was in a similar orphanage where I found my drive. Embracing my past transformed my life completely." Jack felt himself sway between disbelief and inspiration. Could he truly stand alongside a person of her caliber, someone whose wisdom reflected the very essence of his mission? It was a moment that solidified the tether of his intent, fueling him beyond the boundaries he had previously accepted. Ethan scowled at Leela's engagement with Jack, reluctance worming into his swagger. "Surely you don't want to waste your time on such a reckless venture, Leela. The board has no interest in philanthropic endeavors." His voice dripped with undercurrents of possessiveness, a clear attempt at discrediting Jack. But Lila maintained her focus on Jack, ignoring Ethan. "You need to prepare a more detailed presentation. Show them not just what you want to accomplish, but why it matters, both to you and to potential stakeholders. Passion alone can't fuel this initiative. You need data, solid plans. I can help with that." Jack was struck by her words, a realization cutting through the fog surrounding his ideas. He had been so consumed by emotional impulses that he had neglected the practical side of his aspirations. Lila's encouragement felt deceptively simple, yet pivotal. He could infuse his vision with structure, anchoring it with facts and targeted outreach. The path forward now felt both exhilarating and daunting. Questions swirled in his mind. How would he forge this partnership? What would he need to change in his approach? Fortitude turned his doubt into determination. Lila turned to address the room, silencing any whispers of dissent. "Now, I propose we break down the barriers of preconceived notions, engage in open discussion, and not close ourselves off to approaches that challenge our norms. Each of you can contribute to something remarkable if you allow it." Jack's pulse quickened. Lila had shifted the dynamics. She wasn't merely an ally, but a catalyst for potential transformation. The collective atmosphere of doubt began to crack, offering a glimpse of the possibilities. "Let's see how this plays out, shall we?" Ethan sneered, his bravado faltering under the incandescent light of the unfolding moment. "I will," Jack asserted, newfound conviction threading through his voice. This was his chance, the culmination of fears and realizations colliding as he began to carve out parameters for his mission. Leela stepped beside him, offering a solid grounding. He felt the weight of her expectation, heavy yet liberating. But even amid the unfolding revelation, shadows remained. Questions of what it would take to stand firm against pushback, and how far he would have to stretch himself to make this vision a reality. Jack felt the occasion teetering at the edge of hope and uncertainty, poised to explode into either setbacks or breakthroughs. What would it take to reframe his power in this narrative? He was ready to unravel that mystery, but realization hit. His reckoning with Ethan was far from over. The room fell silent again, but Jack caught a glimpse of both his potential and his peril. This was just the beginning, and the stakes were rising. A sense of urgency thrummed in his veins as he confronted the tantalizing unknowns that lay ahead. Would he be able to translate this opportunity into tangible change, or would Ethan's disdainful doubts ensnare him once again? In that charged atmosphere, Jack braced himself, knowing truly he would have to confront not just his adversary, but the limitations of his own past, igniting fires he hadn't realized were ready to burn. Jack left the meeting room, the echo of Leela's encouragement pulsing through him. The sterile fluorescent lights flickered as he walked away, illuminating the stark white walls that felt more like barriers than boundaries. Each step awakened a purpose within him, but doubt lingered, lurking beneath the surface like a distant thrum. He had been on the outskirts of corporate life for too long, mired in self-doubt and a lack of clarity. Leela's words reverberated in his mind, sounding like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. He needed to create a presentation that was not just a rehash of his emotional journey, but a clear, data-driven narrative. As he walked down the corridor, he envisioned the slides unfolding before him. Graphs, statistics, projected impacts. The clarity of purpose felt intoxicating, yet daunting. In the quiet of his small, cluttered office, Jack sat at his desk with a blank notepad staring back at him. It was now or never. The room felt stifling, almost claustrophobic, echoing with his earlier fears. He needed to step beyond the personal motivations that had previously defined him. What if he opened himself to the challenges that lay ahead, rather than shrinking from them? He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and let the memories of his childhood wash over him. The warmth of his early mentors, and the crushing loneliness of being overlooked. Those children, no, those future leaders, were counting on him. With Leela's insights in mind, Jack began to list down tangible goals. One bullet point captured his attention: mentorship programs. Guiding young minds, offering them pathways to success. They needed more than just support. They needed access to opportunities that he had often taken for granted. His pen flew across the page, each word a protest against the constraints of his self-imposed limitations. He committed to metrics: how many children he could reach, how many mentors he could recruit, the financials of sustaining such a program. But data alone wasn't enough. What would make his proposal resonate with people like Ethan? Jack pivoted again, focusing on the narrative. The tale of resilience, the undeniable human element behind the statistics. Would they feel those emotions? Would they recognize the profound impact of every life-changing story? Suddenly, the door swung open, jolting Jack from his thoughts. Ethan leaned against the frame with an expression that was half amusement, half disdain. "Nice to see you're not taking the hint, Jack. Still playing with your little ideas?" Jack squared his shoulders, a newfound boldness pushing back against Ethan's condescension. "Actually, I'm taking this very seriously. If you've got a better proposal to transform kids' lives, I'd love to see it." Ethan's smile faltered briefly, irritation flaring in his eyes. "You think you can convince anyone with fairy tales? This is about profits, not playground dreams." It struck Jack how deeply this encounter reflected his internal conflict. He was wrestling not only with Ethan, but also with an ingrained skepticism that tempered his ambition. Maybe it's time to consider something more than just profits. Perhaps investing in people yields richer returns. Ethan arched an eyebrow, caught between surprise and annoyance. You'll find quickly that idealism doesn't pay the bills. As Ethan walked away, Jack's mind raced. Was he truly prepared to face the pushback, not only from skeptics, but also from the very parts of himself that doubted his worth? Each word he'd just uttered felt like a thread, weaving together a tapestry of determination. Still, uncertainty hung over him like a storm cloud. What would happen if he failed? Jack grabbed his notepad again, his heart racing as he continued to envision how he could present his ideas convincingly. This wasn't merely about convincing others, it was about solidifying his commitment to a purpose greater than himself. That night, he stayed late, enveloped in the glow of the computer screen. He drafted ideas, structured plans, and rehearsed his presentation, feeling the narrative crystallizing. But as he delved deeper, thoughts of Ethan's taunts echoed painfully in his mind. The very essence of his past, the fear of inadequacy, ripped open like an old wound. As he closed his laptop, a sinking sensation formed in his stomach. Had he truly done enough to prepare for the upcoming meeting? The stakes loomed larger than ever. Would he rise to the occasion or crumble under the weight of expectation? The thought rattled him. He realized he wasn't just fighting Ethan, he was ultimately fighting himself. The clock ticked ominously, each passing minute pressing against his resolve. Jack lay awake, thoughts spiraling, pondering, what would he need to combat not just external criticism, but the internal narrative that had long constrained him? The room felt heavy with the anticipation of decisions yet to come, and he couldn't help but wonder, could he overcome his past, mold a future? As dawn crept through his office window, Jack awoke with a start. The remnants of a restless night lingered in his body, becoming a weight he would need to shake off. The meeting would be pivotal, a crossroads that demanded not just information, but conviction. He was teetering on the edge of transformation, ready to leap into what felt like an abyss. Jack paced his office, feeling the stirring of his childhood memories guide him, leading him deep into a narrative that had shaped his life. The warmth of the orphanage he had grown up in, its walls adorned with echoes of laughter and the weight of heartbreak, ignited an ember of determination inside him. He was no longer merely an employee crammed into a corporate machine. He was a vessel, capable of channeling the stories of resilience that had raised him. He halted abruptly in front of his cluttered desk, grasping his notepad as if it were a lifeline. What changed a life? Was it opportunity, mentorship, or the quiet acknowledgement that someone believed in you? It was these thoughts that would spearhead his presentation. The data-driven approach he had clung to suddenly felt hollow without the heartbeat of personal narrative. Jack needed to weave the stark statistics into a quilt of stories that illustrated their human cost and value. Tension surged through him as he sat back down, balancing his pen against a new sheet of paper. He scribbled headers, purpose, vision, impact. Each word demanded a thought exploration. How could he articulate the transformative power that mentorship had in his life? The statements constructed could no longer be about monetary gain, but rather a radical idea, catering to the souls of the children he aimed to inspire. They needed to know, to feel, that there were paths laid before them, not just obstacles. Hours ticked by unnervingly, Jack lost in a whirlwind of creativity and self-doubt. He wrote feverishly, filling the pages with anecdotes about his experiences at the orphanage, how his mentors had opened doors he never knew existed. The recollections shaped his proposal, light and color pouring from the pages, allowing him to envision the face of the child he once was, yearning for guidance. As he worked, a new idea emerged, one that gnawed at the edges of his concentration. Jack needed to juxtapose the statistics of the initiative with his personal story, to connect the dots in a way that would resonate with a boardroom full of skeptics. Could he craft a moment during the presentation where he shared the impact of one specific mentor? Perhaps a story that showed the very fabric of human connection, a stark contrast to the coldly calculated spreadsheets. Just as clarity struck, the oppressive weight of self-doubt crept back in. What if they dismiss him? What if they saw his story as just that, a story with no grounding in the harsh realities of business? As he glanced at the clock, his stomach tightened. The meeting loomed closer, a specter that combined the potential for promise and fear. Jack took a step away from his desk, breathing deeply. He needed an anchor, something to fortify him against the impending storm. He reflected on his reason for pushing forth. The children. They deserved a champion, not a stammering speaker who faltered in the face of adversity. He thought of Leela, how her unwavering confidence had lent him a sliver of belief in himself. That belief could be his beacon now. In that moment of resolve, he picked up his phone, hesitating only for a heartbeat before dialing Leela's number. The familiar ring echoed in his ears. When her voice finally answered, Jack felt renewed strength coursing through him. "Leela, I need your insight. Can we go over my proposal together?" As they discussed the framework, he felt pieces of themselves click into place. Each word of encouragement instilled resolve. Each suggestion refined his narrative approach. The more they talked, the clearer his message became. They laughed over shared memories of their own trials, their mutual struggles becoming a powerful source of solidarity. After they hung up, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. He could do this. The journey ahead may still be fraught with challenges, but he was no longer a former child lost in uncertainty. He was a professional, stepping boldly into the breach, ready to confront his past and embrace the future. The clock struck the hour of the meeting, sending his heart racing once more. As he adjusted his tie, a sudden realization washed over him. There, within the impending confrontation, lay a hidden potential he had not fully grasped before. The time had come to face not just the skeptics in the room, but the shadow of his former self, the boy who felt invisible and alone. He steeled himself, ready to declare his mission with all the fervor of a faith rediscovered. Stepping into the boardroom, he caught a glimpse of Ethan's condescending smirk. The challenge electrified him. The moment of truth had arrived, and Jack understood with clarity. This was not just a presentation. It was a declaration, a chance to shape a legacy that stretched beyond the numerical data, rooted firmly in humanity. And as the murmur of conversations faded, he knew the next question echoing in his mind would define him. Would they listen to a dreamer with dollar signs in their eyes, or a visionary with a heart? Jack cleared his throat, the taste of anxiety mingling with determination. He scanned the boardroom, taking in the sea of skeptical faces adorned with polished suits, each one a potential barrier to his dreams. But beneath their polished exterior, he sensed something more: curiosity. They were waiting, unsure of what he would present. The air was thick with tension, and yet it ignited a fire within him. He stepped forward, confident in this newfound clarity that had taken root in his mind. Instead of diving headfirst into the cold statistics that once occupied his mind, he settled on the notion that personal relevance would be pivotal. He decided to lead with the story that had never quite left him, the one that shifted his perspective on success. Good morning, everyone. I want to start today with a story. The words hung in the air, a fragile bridge between his past and their potential acceptance. He painted a vivid picture of the orphanage. The cracked and peeling walls seemed to come alive as he described the laughter of children echoing through the halls, moments of fleeting joy juxtaposed against the persistent struggle for hope. He told them of Mrs. Thompson, the mentor who saw potential in every child, like a sculptor perceiving a statue in a block of marble. As he spoke, he noticed Ethan lean back in his chair, arms crossed. Jack felt the weight of judgment emanating from him, but pressed on. He shared how Mrs. Thompson pulled him aside one morning, her voice steady in its conviction. "Jack, you have something special. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." It was a fragment of encouragement, yet it transformed his outlook, propelling him towards opportunities he had never imagined. Jack's voice grew stronger as he connected his past with the present, visibly shifting the atmosphere of the room. Every life impacted by mentorship changes the trajectory of a future. It is not just about numbers, it's about people, stories. These children are waiting for someone to champion them, just as I was once championed. He could feel the energy in the room crackle as he shared the staggering statistics of children who aged out of the system without support, likely destined for a life without guidance. With each statistic, he tied it back to his story, and suddenly it wasn't just a presentation filled with numbers, it became a heartfelt declaration for change. But as he spoke, doubt crept in again, born from Ethan's challenging gaze. This was a man whose influence slithered through the boardroom, planting seeds of doubt among his colleagues. The tension was palpable, and Jack wondered if he could truly sway their perception. "Jack," Ethan interrupted, a thin smile betraying his skepticism, "what you're describing sounds noble, but emotions don't always translate to profit. How can you ensure that this approach yields any kind of measurable return?" The question struck like a bolt of lightning, rattling Jack's resolve momentarily. A part of him wanted to wilt under the scrutiny, to retreat to the safety of data and numbers, but he felt the heat of defiance building within him. Because, he began slowly, searching for the right words, the return on investment for mentorship isn't always financial. He leaned against a table, his eyes fixed on Ethan, determined. When we invest in children, we're investing in our future. We're giving them tools to break cycles of poverty, to become leaders, to enrich our communities, and yes, our economy. He watched as murmurs rippled through the boardroom. Some faces softened, and he seized the opportunity. Moment to build momentum. He refused to back down from the challenge. In that instant, Jack discovered a hidden reservoir of strength. The audience's shifting dynamics fueled him, transforming his resolve into a clarion call. His conviction wasn't simply built upon the weight of his narrative. It was born of an intricate understanding that the greater struggle was not merely against skepticism, but within himself, a reflection of every doubt he had faced since childhood. He concluded with an open invitation for dialogue, inviting questions to further bridge the gap between his vision and their concerns. I believe we can all rally behind this initiative, not just because it is necessary, but because it is our duty. As silence embraced the room, a new tension hung in the air, a challenge with the potential for collaborative growth, but also the dread of rebuttal. In the unexpected quiet, Jack realized that the next step would demand more than just convincing. It called for confronting the very core of his ambition, laying bare the stakes he had projected beyond the boardroom walls. Would he ignite a movement or extinguish the flicker of hope that these children represented? As he braced for whatever might come next, the question of his professional legacy loomed large, making the stakes clearer than ever. The real battle had just begun, and he felt the tug of destiny drawing him deeper into the fray, one challenging conversation at a time. The tension that enveloped Jack felt like a clock ticking down to an inevitable confrontation. Every second seemed to stretch as he waited for someone to speak. He was acutely aware of the weight of expectation placed upon him. This wasn't just about the presentation. It was about his entire journey, the risks he'd taken, and the sacrifices made. Just as the silence felt overwhelming, Sarah, one of the younger board members, leaned forward. "I think you're right, Jack. It does sound like a powerful idea, but how can we make it scalable?" Her voice was steady but curious, opening the door for further discussion, and Jack felt a flicker of hope. "Great question, Sarah," he replied, shifting gears. "Scaling this initiative requires a structured mentorship program backed by data and long-term tracking of outcomes. We can employ technology to connect potential mentors with kids based on shared interests and backgrounds. This provides tailored guidance instead of a one-size-fits-all approach." Jack watched as nods passed among the board members. They were willing to listen, which in itself was a triumph against the skepticism that had initially filled the room. But he knew that this was only the beginning. Ethan, his expression still skeptical, took the opportunity to challenge once again. "And what about the financial resources? It sounds expensive. Can we afford to divert funds from more traditional investments?" The question landed heavily, and Jack felt his stomach sink. Yet, in that moment, he realized he had to tap into the resource he had honed through years of resilience, strategic thinking.
"Ethan, let's think about it differently. This investment isn't simply a cost, it's an opportunity. Consider the data from similar programs that show a reduction in crime rates and increased workforce participation rates among mentored youth. The savings from decreased social services costs create a real return for us in the long term." Jack sensed that he began to regain control of his narrative. He presented a vision fortified by pragmatic considerations designed for stakeholders to grasp why this initiative was an indispensable investment, not just charity. The murmurs of agreement started to grow louder, and he took the opportunity to reinforce his core message with one final point. We're not just utilizing the children, we're creating pathways toward leadership and success, nurturing future innovators and business owners. This is about building a robust economy for all of us, ultimately increasing profits across the board. The boardroom dynamic continued shifting, but Ethan's gaze remained fixed and unyielding. Doubt from one competitor had already fueled Jack's determination, yet the battle was far from over. As he forged ahead, answering questions with clarity and confidence, he caught a glimpse of something extraordinary occurring within himself. He realized that if he could navigate through skepticism, he could cultivate a new version of his professional self defined not just by ambition, but by service, harnessing what he learned in the orphanage and translating it into value for those in power. By the conclusion of the meeting, Jack had projected organizational benefits and cohesive community development, growing his sense of empowerment while remaining remarkably self-aware. Yet, as the last questions filtered through, he was acutely conscious that if he were to make this initiative resonate deeply, he needed to confront one more barrier: his own lingering self-doubt. The clock had descended again, marking a new urgency. He felt the tug of significance beyond his ambition, pressing harder now than ever. How far was he willing to reach, and would that reach enable him to embrace vulnerability while demanding respect? Just as he felt he had grasped a semblance of their attention, an unexpected voice broke through the cadence of business. "Jack, I don't think you've finished answering my original question," Ethan interjected. Jack inhaled sharply, feeling the momentum shift dangerously in a heartbeat. The stakes had escalated once more, demanding an audacious response. Would he rise to meet the challenge, or would the shadows of doubt dim the light of hope he sought to ignite for those children? It was clear Jack had no choice to face Ethan head-on, not just to defend his vision, but to explore the depths of his own conviction. The moment had arrived for confrontation, one that would determine both his credibility and the future he hoped to impact. Would he find the words, or would the tremors of doubt shatter everything he believed? Jack's heart raced as he locked eyes with Ethan. The air felt heavy, thick with the tension of impending conflict, yet beneath that, a current of determination surged within him.
This was more than an argument about money or resources. It was a test of his very worth and the dreams he carried, forged in the fires of his past. "Ethan, I appreciate your concern about the financial implications," Jack began, his voice steadying. He pushed down the tightness in his throat as he formulated his thoughts. "But imagine the impact we could have. I'm not talking about a short-term project. I'm suggesting a long-term partnership that transforms lives. Have you considered that the children we help today could become tomorrow's leaders? Imagine the return on investment, not just in profits, but in societal change." Ethan leaned back, his brow furrowing as he scrutinized Jack. Behind that skeptical exterior, Jack recognized a flicker of interest. Perhaps acknowledging the authenticity of his vision could shift the tide in his favor. Deep down, Jack felt an urgency to convey the essence of mentorship, the unquantifiable value of empowering youth, a concept rooted in his own troubled upbringing. "We're all products of our environment," Jack continued, his voice gaining momentum as he allowed passion to seep through. "The orphanage I grew up in was my forge. The mentors I had made the difference between despair and hope. The same opportunity we can extend to others has the potential to create a ripple effect, influencing not just individuals, but entire families and communities." The room held its breath. For a brief moment, Jack envisioned his words encapsulating the board members, wrapping them in an understanding that transcended mere business metrics. He was connecting to something more. Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line as he raised an eyebrow. "I understand your passion, Jack, but can we as an organization afford the risk? Can you guarantee results?" Jack's pulse quickened at the framing of the question. It was a challenge rooted in fear of failure, a sentiment he'd battled countless times before. His instincts bristled, reminding him of the stakes involved. But he had faced loss, abandonment, and doubt. He wouldn't allow fear to dictate his response now. "No, Ethan, I can't guarantee immediate results, but I can assure you that every dollar spent is an investment in human potential. And with the right strategies and support, we will measure progress every step of the way, Jack replied, his gaze unwavering. He searched the faces of the board members, willing them to see the reality he envisioned. Emboldened by his own conviction, Jack drew upon truths he rarely spoke of. I've seen what lack of guidance leads to. I've been there, as a child filled with potential and uncertainty, clinging to the hope offered by a few brave adults. Investing in mentorship isn't just a smart financial strategy, it's a moral obligation. If not us, then who? The silence that followed felt electric, charged with the essence of truth. Beyond the numbers and projections lay a profound ethical landscape, and Jack felt within him a growing strength, driven by the echoes of his past. It struck him, the deeper he reached for understanding, the more his own story became a crucial part of the narrative he was weaving for others. Just as he believed he had seized the moment, Ethan's voice cut through again, sharper this time. "That's all good sentiment, Jack, but emotions won't balance the books. What's the bottom line?" Jack's breath hitched. He sensed the shift aura around him and realized that he faced a larger battle, not just with Ethan, but with the growing echoes of doubt within. Would he continue to advocate from a place of personal truth, or would he succumb to the pressure to compromise his integrity? The choice crystallized before him, profound and paralyzing, illuminating the path of professional authenticity he yearned for, yet feared to claim. And as the clock ticked on, Jack felt the pivotal moment arrive. He could either back down or amplify his message. The decision loomed ahead of him like a precipice. What he would eventually choose could alter not just his career, but possibly the trajectory of lives yet untouched. With a newfound intensity swirling through him, Jack steadied himself, ready to confront the challenge head-on. He could feel it in his bones. The time had come to face the trepidations that dawned in him. What resonated was clear. This was only the beginning of a deeper exploration of conviction. But the question lingered. Would this resolution ignite the momentum needed, or would anchored expectations anchor him to a fate of doubt instead? Jack inhaled sharply, the weight of Ethan's skepticism heavy in the still air. The board was more than just a table of executives. They were gatekeepers to a future he envisioned, a future where mentorship wasn't just a dream, but a reality. As he stood firm, he felt the collective gaze weighing on him. Doubt flickered in his mind, pressing against his confidence, but he resisted. The path he had chosen was steep, riddled with uncertainty, yet his memories were lit like guiding stars. "Let's talk totals, shall we?" a board member interjected, aiming to break the palpable tension. "What kind of numbers are we looking at?" Jack seized this opportunity, casting aside his swirling thoughts, and shifted into planning mode. It's not merely about immediate grants or memorandums. Think of it this way: what if we graph our impact over time? How many we will reach, what programs we could develop, and the subsequent transformations we will witness. Ethan's brow furrowed deeper, but Jack pressed on. Imagine an annual report not just filled with figures, but also showcasing success stories, the metrics of hope actualized. I can outline benchmarks and evaluations to track our progress every step of the way. We can even adjust as needed. That's the deal I propose. From the corner of his mind, Jack recalled the faces of those children back in the orphanage. Every mentor, every friendly ear helped sculpt the man he was today. The resilience that was forged in adversity ignited within him a duty to give back, to spill the knowledge he had soaked in, and that duty overshadowed the lingering doubts threatening to steer him off course. Ethan nodded slightly, his demeanor shifting from rigid to contemplative, a sign that perhaps Jack had landed a solid point. Yet, still, the looming question of profitability remained unaddressed. And these success stories, how will they translate into financial returns? Ethan challenged, his voice leveling out like a roll of thunder. Jack took a moment. This was the essence of his dilemma: how to marry passion with pragmatism. To me, mentorship is the fabric of our society, a multi-generational investment. When you invest in a child, you invest in the future workforce, the future innovators, even the future advocates for our organization. The returns won't always be immediate, but they will be profound. As he spoke, Jack realized he wasn't just defending a proposal. He was advocating for a purpose woven deeply into his identity. It was like digging into the roots of his past and nurturing the sapling of his present. The meeting progressed, each passing moment an exploration of resistance and acceptance, with discussions flowing like a dynamic river, sometimes turbulent, sometimes calm, but always moving. Jack grasped at the significance of his own narrative, realizing he was beginning to craft a story larger than those present, one that reached beyond financial spreadsheets and outcomes. But even as arguments unfolded and points were exchanged, he felt an unsettling truth stir. There was a gnawing fear deep within him. What if he could not balance his idealism with the expectations of the board? Would he find solace in the compromises, or would he lose sight of his original mission? The meeting drew to a close, and as the board members filed out, Jack hung back, reflecting on the balance he was trying to strike. Each interaction had been a test of his own integrity. Could he continue along this path without losing the essence of which he fought for? That night, Jack sat at home, poring over his notes and writing down every thought. His heart beat a relentless tattoo against the backdrop of quietude. He could feel momentum building, yet it came with the burden of responsibility. As he turned off the light, a thought sparked. What if he reached out to one of his old mentors for guidance? The irony was not lost on him. Could he, the man who once craved guidance, now seek it from those who had once lifted him? Tomorrow could mark a new chapter in his journey, a step not only towards a decision on mentorship, but a personal revelation about the long-held belief that true strength lies not just in self-sufficiency, but in the courage to ask for help. The idea formed a knot of uncertainty in his chest, but above it coursed a glimmer of hope, igniting the question, what might he discover through this outreach that could reshape his understanding? As the sun rose the next day, a quiet sense of purpose enveloped Jack Harmon. He sat before his laptop, fingers hovering above the keyboard, contemplating the weight of his past and the profound journey ahead. The meeting had etched itself into his memory, both as a challenge and a validation of his resolve. Today, he would reach out to Mrs. Thompson, the mentor who had pulled him from despair into possibility, her encouragement igniting a spark that had dimmed but never extinguished. Jack drafted a brief message, outlining his recent endeavors, the forthcoming mentorship initiative, and a simple request for guidance. He pressed send, feeling a ripple of relief wash over him. A reminder that seeking help doesn't equate to weakness, but rather signifies strength and humility. This was growth. A few hours later, an email pinged. Mrs. Thompson's response resonated with warmth, her belief in his potential palpable even through the screen. "I always knew you'd make an impact, Jack. Meeting me at the coffee house today is an excellent idea." Her words, like a balm, reassured him that he belonged on this path. The subsequent hour found him nervously adjusting his tie, the familiar pangs of doubt gnawing at his confidence. Yet, as Jack approached the coffee house, he reminded himself of the work laid out before him. This meeting wasn't just about reminiscing, it was a critical learning opportunity to fortify the framework of his mentorship initiative. When he entered, Jack caught sight of Mrs. Thompson, and the years melted away. Her presence was a soothing reminder of the compassion that had once saved him. They exchanged pleasantries, but it was laughter that swiftly filled the air, breaking the ice and guiding them into meaningful dialogue. As they spoke, Jack shared insights about the board meeting and his proposal, anxiously awaiting Mrs. Thompson's feedback. Her face reflected pride and passion. "Jack, this is about far more than mentorship," she said, her eyes sparkling with resolve. "You're standing on the cusp of transforming lives. Remember, it's okay to integrate emotional power into your strategy. People connect with stories, especially stories rooted in authenticity. Emboldened, Jack detailed his plans to retain both the emotional and factual sides of his presentation. He would showcase real kids, real stories. Their futures demanded more than data, they demanded connection. Mrs. Thompson nodded. And metrics are important, but always tie them back to the human elements. The numbers should highlight the lives behind them, not overshadow them. As their conversation delved deeper, Jack realized that this meeting was not merely a source of guidance. It became a transformative experience. He embraced the lessons she shared, reconciling the fears that had held him back. The shadows of doubt that had clouded his aspirations began to thin, revealing a sunlight-bright clarity instead. After their discussion, Jack emerged ready to wrap his project in the very spirit of mentorship he had once absorbed. He recognized that he possessed a potent mix of resilience and ambition, harnessed and refined.
Through each bruise of self-doubt and hardship, he was prepared to face Ethan again, not just for himself, but for the children who deserved to be seen and heard. The next board meeting approached with renewed vigor. Prepared with data, stories, and a strategic evaluation plan, Jack felt a solid confidence build within him. This was not just a presentation, it was a declaration of purpose grounded in personal transformation. As he entered the boardroom, he felt more than ready. He felt empowered. When faced with Ethan's grim expression, Jack's voice was calm and assured. He outlined the initiative with deft precision, layering in the experiences he'd shared with Mrs. Thompson. He told stories of children yearning for mentorship, showing how their potential could bloom with just a little guidance. His narrative flowed, merging metrics with undeniable human stories. It transcended an argument and became a heartfelt mission. Ethan attempted to disrupt with cynicism, but Jack stood firm, articulating the intricacies of mentorship's impact, how it molded future leaders, contributed to positive societal change, and eventually led to economic growth. The tension in the room shifted as board members leaned in, intrigued by the new perspective Jack presented. This time, when he finished, the silence held promise. Jack was met with thoughtfulness rather than disdain. Sarah spoke up first. "This approach is refreshing. You're bridging something vital." He could see nods of agreement whispering through the room. Ethan's skepticism slowly dimmed, glimmers of acknowledgement. "You might have something here, Jack." With validated resolve, Jack realized that he had not merely conquered his fears, he had created a space for dialogue, elevating his narrative. Each committee member began discussing how to integrate the proposal into their plans. Days turned into weeks, and as the mentorship initiative gained traction, funding began to flow. Jack reveled in the fruits of his labor, not just in financial terms, but in the blossoming lives he sought to impact. He organized workshops, recruited mentors, and witnessed notable transformations within the children. Seeing their faces filled him with pride. The very weight of his past transformed into an anchor of purpose, guiding him forward. Jack had proven not only to himself, but to the world, that the potential for greatness exists within every child, once someone dares to believe in them. Jack stood confidently in front of a group of eager children, sharing his story once more, hoping to ignite within them the same belief that he had ultimately found. He had transformed, achieving not just success in business, but fulfillment in his soul, establishing himself as a champion for change, someone who would fight for a future filled with hope and possibility. This was not just the closing chapter of one journey, but the beginning of something larger than himself. Jack Harmon had risen, his heart full, eyes set on a horizon vast with opportunities, and he knew this was just the start. And as he embraced his purpose, he felt a profound connection to both his past and future. Doing so, Jack transformed his life forever. Now is your moment. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support is vital. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Jack's incredible journey.
Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this life-changing conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to spread the inspiration.